Hello YouTube. So today we've really got an interesting topic to discuss, talking about CO2 rifles versus PCP rifles. So can CO2 rifles really compete with the PCPs? Well, on the one hand, definitely not. But on the other hand, there's definitely a place where CO2 rifles compete with PCPs. So where do they not compete? Well, when we get to the higher end stuff, we're talking about 10,000 Rand or 500 pounds and up, then definitely we're starting to get to the higher end PCPs, and even looking at more expensive PCPs, we definitely cannot really compare the CO2s when we get to that. But where the CO2s do compare to PCPs, and in my eyes are even better than PCPs, is when we're talking about budget. So let's compare some budget CO2 rifles versus some budget PCP rifles, and let's see why I say CO2 rifles really have a place, and perhaps even better than PCPs when it comes to budget considerations. So let's use the Artemis CP2 and the Artemis PR900 to compare. These are both entry-level guns, and basically almost the same. The PR900 is a slightly longer barrel than the CP2, but other than that they're almost identical. The only difference is one is PCP and one is CO2. Let's start with price. So Artemis CP2 we're looking at $150. Artemis PR900 we're looking at about $225. And then obviously for PCP we also have to add a pump or a dive cylinder or something along those lines. So I've just added $250 for a simple pump here. Obviously pump not being the best thing, but at least we can put it in there. Definitely we can see there's a major difference in the total price. For CO2 you're looking at about a third of the price of a PCP. Yes, there is a little bit of cost in the CO2 capsules, but it is fairly minimal. If we're looking at about 300 shots a month, you're going to pay about $10 for that. So not really even worth considering. So let's now move across to performance of CO2 rifles versus PCP rifles. But before we get too far into this discussion, let's just set some boundaries for this discussion. Obviously, we already mentioned we're not looking at high-end PCPs. We are looking at budget PCPs and budget CO2 rifles. So this is for shooting in your backyard. So let's put it maximum to, let's say, 20 meters. If we want to go further than 20 meters, we're anyways going to have to add all sorts of telescopes and optics and stuff to be able to do that effectively. So let's keep it to 20 meter shooting in the backyard. And then also obviously there is a measure of pest control or hunting that we might want to be doing with the CO2 or PCP rifle. So let's start off by looking at the feet per second of these two rifles that we're considering here. So on this side you can see we've got the Artemis CP2, which is running at about 650 feet per second after I've done the upgrade. I'll put a link in the description below for that video on how to upgrade your feet per seconds of your Artemis CP2. And if we think about the PCP, the PR900, it's running at about 750 feet per second. The rest of the two rifles are very much similar, same trigger, same breech. The extra feet per second on the PCP or the PR19 is purely due to the higher pressure of the air in the chamber, as well as the longer, slightly longer barrel on the PR900. So yes, there is a slight difference in feet per second, but will it really make a difference? Well, let's then consider the next point, which is accuracy. can these two CO2 rifle and the PCP rifle, can they compare when it comes to accuracy? Well, for accuracy, basically at 20 meters, these two guns are going to be almost exactly the same. There might be a slight more curved trajectory on the CP2, but very, very slight. Remember, we're not shooting out to 40 or 50 meters here. We're shooting to 20 meters, 10 meters. So it's really going to be negligible, the difference. And because the CO2 and the PCP act on the same principles by releasing air, these are both very easy rifles to shoot. They are not like a Springer that's got heavy recoil, that's very hold sensitive. So both the PCP and the CP2 will be able to be just as accurate as long as you've done your homework and checked which pellet it suits your gun and gone through the different steps of setting up your scope correctly and all that kind of stuff. Then most definitely these two rifles will be equally as accurate. How about ease of use? Well, here I think the CO2 rifle definitely has a bit of an edge, because to carry those little CO2 capsules around is very easy, and you're not going to shoot 300 shots in one go. So most probably you're going to shoot, say, 30 or 50 shots. So you can take 2 capsules and that's easy to carry around. But with a PCP, you always need to have an external air source. So either you need a pump, which was the cheapest option that we put in, or you need to go for a air scuba diving tank, or you need to go for a compressor. These are even more expensive options. And if you go for the option of the pump, you must know that you're definitely not going to need to go to the gym anytime soon, because you're going to be doing a lot of workout just to pump up that gun. If you go to the diving bottle, basically this is going to also add extra costs again, because it needs to be checked once a year. It needs to be pressure tested. If there's rust or something like that inside, it needs to be cleaned out. So yes, this adds extra cost, and also it's a fairly weighty thing to carry around as well. And the same goes for the compressor, also adds quite a bit of extra costs. So definitely I think the CO2 in ease of use definitely has the upper hand here. Easy to carry around, easy to load, and you can be on your way again. How about multiple shot capability? Because these are obviously something that's better than the Springers. The Springers, you have to load one at a time. Well, in this case, both CO2 and PCP both have multiple shot capabilities. Both of these guns come with a magazine, and you can shoot numerous shots. On the CO2, we have to, however, be mindful of the fact that we cannot shoot too quickly after each other, as this may affect the feet per second spread that we have. So might just have to be mindful and consciously think that we need to give a little bit of time in between shots when we're shooting the CO2. There is also another factor which is a little bit negative on the CO2 side, and that's if you are in a place that's very cold. So obviously these weather conditions has a negative effect on the CO2. So if you're in a very cold place, you might have to make some kind of a plan to be able to warm up your CO2 cartridges, which the PCP does not have this problem. So just one thing we need to bear in mind when we talk about CO2 air rifles. And then the last one, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that's hunting, because I'm going to go into more detail in future videos when it comes to hunting. But definitely both of these rifles, CO2 and a PCP air rifle, can be used for hunting. And I've hunted many squirrels, pigeons with my CO2 rifle, and I want to go into a bit more detail going forward regarding that. But the main thing that we want to remember is the accuracy. If we can hit our target in the right place, then we do not have to hit the target at 1,500 feet per second. If we can hit it in the right place with enough energy, we'll definitely be able to dispatch that game or that quarry, or that pest for that matter, in a humane manner. So that gives us a little bit more of a background about CO2 versus PCP. Definitely we can see when it comes to cost, CO2 is king. Definitely much cheaper than going the PCP route. If we come to accuracy, much, especially if we're looking at out to 20 meters, anything from 10 to 20 meters, it's going to be negligible. You'll definitely get the same accuracy out of these two rifles. Ease of use, I think the CO2 definitely wins that one a little bit. Much easier to use, don't need to have an external air source that you're carrying around with you the whole time. Both of these guns have multiple shot capabilities, which gives them a big advantage over the Springer, which you need to cock and load every time. And then also the one negative and one thing that we really need to keep in mind with the CO2 is the fact that you cannot shoot too fast, and if you stay in a very cold climate, this cold climate can affect that feet per second that you get out of your CO2 rifle. And then when it comes to hunting, we'll discuss it again a bit further, but definitely hunting is possible with both the CO2 and PCP air rifle. So after all of this, what's your choice? Well, to be honest, I have a budget, and my budget is fairly limited, so definitely I'm going to stick to my CO2 air rifle, and I'm not even going to worry about the PCPs. If I take some of these higher end PCPs, talking about like the Edgun, Layla, these kind of things, in South Africa it costs 30,000 Rand, which is probably around $2,000, $2,500. And with 30,000 Rand here in South Africa, I can buy a car. So definitely I'll be sticking to my Artemis CP2, and I'm going to enjoy it. So yes, there you have it. Another video from me, Tyron McLaren, and really look forward to the next video as we start to discuss a little bit more of the shooting in detail. But yes, if it was my choice, and if you've got a budget, go for the CO2 air rifle. You won't be sorry.